I'm Mark Gavin with Appligent. I want to talk to you today about redaction, redaction tools, and the common criteria profile for redaction. In a nutshell, to start with, the common criteria protection profile for redaction is a set of rules, conformance requirements, tests, if you will, that a redaction tool, or in general, a piece of software or a technology needs to conform to comply with in order to be, basically, to prove that it can do what it says it's supposed to do. In the case of a redaction tool, when you're expecting a redaction tool to actually redact your document, does it do that? Now, the common criteria protection profile is, again, that set of rules that need to be tested against to prove that this piece of software, the redaction tool itself, is working. So, start with overview. How many here, I just want to make sure, is everybody here familiar with redaction? Anybody not know what I'm talking about when I say redaction? Okay, cool. How many of you have actually used a redaction tool? Okay, a few of you. Actually had in DC, but yesterday had a lot of people who used redaction tools in the presentation. So redaction is just removing information for a variety of reasons. But when we think of redaction, we classically think of those things that you see on 60 Minutes where the pages get blacked out. It turns out that,
Excuse me.
Yeah.
Either your microphone's not working well or the volume needs to be turned up.
Okay.
I can't hear you very well.
Okay.
And I'm not-
I don't have.
It's a volume issue.
Okay. I don't have volume control on this thing. So anyhow. Okay. Speak up. When you see these things on 60 Minutes, and you're talking typically about things that are coming from the government that have been redacted for security reasons, it turns out that's actually a very small portion of the amount of data that people actually redact. When it comes right down to it, volume-wise, the stuff that really gets redacted in the regular world is mostly privacy data, not government secrets. Volume-wise, the biggest single thing that ever gets redacted is Social Security numbers, followed by signatures. And these things are littered over documents all over the place. And those documents are stored and archived, and now they're scanned. And those paper files that have your signatures in them have been scanned and put on the web with your signature. And that's become a problem. And it's turning out that states are having to remove that information from documents before they put them on the web. Speak up again. Okay. We've actually done some work for some states for actually getting rid of things like signatures, Social Security numbers, and things like that. And it's a big requirement right now. Another big requirement that's coming up is, again, not government secrets, but healthcare information. For HIPAA compliance, as your medical records get passed from one doctor to another, oh, that's volume, or from one hospital to another, or doctor to hospital, or things like that, some things have to typically get removed. Other things that people don't realize can be redacted. It's actually kind of cool, because there's a lot of documents that go into the public record that can have things redacted from them beforehand, like investigative new drug applications that a pharmaceutical company submits to the FDA. Well, they're trade secret parts, the chemical formula parts, things like that, can get pulled out because they're still trade secrets. Things like legal strategies for your lawyers. Those things get submitted to the courts and the judges and things like that, but you can actually redact those things because they're lawyers and they can do that. Actually, is Mark here? Yes. Now, what redaction is not? I don't know if any of you have ever heard of an electronic reading room. Okay, if you go down to Chantilly, Virginia, the National Reconnaissance Office has this huge facility down there, big blue building, invisible to radar. You go into the, yeah, it is. Go into the front gate, and off to the left-hand side, there's a set of trailers over there. Now, you can walk into the trailers and request information, and the computer screens in front of you will display that information to you. It will display different information depending upon what is your security clearance. So that is being masked on the fly, depending on who you are. That's not redaction, because you're not actually removing the information from the document. There's another key word that is actually being overused in the government called sanitization. And what that means is where information is removed from a document so you never know it was there. That's also not redaction. Now, classically, how you redact information, and according to the government, you still have to do it this way if you are working with secret documents, is that you have to get an X-Acto knife and cut out the information, photocopy the document, and then release it to the public. Now, if you want to do this electronically, you can. You can use an electronic redaction tool to mask out the information, print the document, scan the document, and then release it to the public. That's how electronic redaction works on secret documents right now, by definition. And you can go read the documentation that tells you exactly how to do this. And I'll give you a link to some of that. Now, one of the reasons the government's been so hesitant to just use a redaction tool, I mean, there's lots of different redaction tools out there right now, to use redaction tool and release documents, is because electronic file formats are very complex. PDF is probably one of the most complex file formats out there. And the question is, if you are doing electronic redaction of a PDF file, did you get everything? Or did you actually redact? Things that can be included in these files are other documents, metadata, hidden data, obscure data. And not only do you have to actually redact the information, you have to make sure that you're redacting all this other stuff as well when you're dealing with electronic files. So, hence the reason for coming up with a common criteria protection profile for redaction. So basically, the Undersecretary of Defense back in 2013 said this is a real problem, we need to solve this, we need to know that these tools are actually capable of doing the things that we need them to do redaction-wise. So, common criteria is something you'll hear a lot in different types of security requirements. Mostly you'll see them related to encryption and encrypting data from passing things from point A to point B, or encryption hardware. And there's protection profiles, primarily dealing with that type of security. The common criteria protection profile for redaction is a little bit different, but it follows the same format as the other protection profiles. Now, who wrote? There's actually a document. You can go out to the web, I'll give you a link on that. It's a 47-page document that outlines this whole thing and explains to you what you need to do to make your electronic tool conform. It was developed by government organizations, primarily the NSA and their commercial offshoots. The National Institute for Standards and Technologies certified laboratories. And in the US, I believe right now there are 8 certified laboratories which have been certified by NIST that says they can go and test against the profiles and verify or certify a piece of software, a piece of technology conforms to the profile. And they also included redaction technology vendors. Actually, here's the whole list of the people who helped develop this particular, I won't call it a standard because it's not an ISO standard, but it is a conformance document. You might be surprised at a couple of them because this is a protection profile for electronic documents, electronic information. And they don't consider PDF as the primary electronic document in all cases because they also include JPEG, TIFF, all the other common types of things that you would see as documents. But Oracle is on the list right here because they are redacting information out of databases. And they have to meet the protection profile as well. So it's not even something as a printed page. So the program scope for this protection profile is standards-based documents or something that's been well documented. So we're not going to, or the profile doesn't apply to things that are created by a Joe programmer for a one-off product that does something. So it's PDF files, Office documents, JPEG files, TIFF files, things that have standards associated with them are the most common things you will use against this protection profile. Now, scope is that it applies to an interactive tool. That means that somebody's using the tool. And it is limited to the redaction functionality of that tool. So for example, Adobe Acrobat has lots of capabilities, but redaction is only a very small portion of that. So the protection profile only applies to that portion which is doing the redaction. Things that are beyond the scope, batch processes, and departmental policy. Redacting information is more than just drawing boxes around something and pressing a button saying go away. There's a lot of work in defining what is to be redacted, and all of that is related to your agency, departmental policy, your law firm, your pharmaceutical company. You have to decide what to redact, and that's beyond the scope of anything a protection profile is talking about. What are the threats to a redaction tool or redaction technology in general? This is a pretty good list right here. You don't want to have the resulting document contain any clues to what was originally there. You don't want the resulting document to have hidden data. So stuff can't be hiding inside the file, which contains clues to what was there or additional information that should have been redacted. Other threats are the software can just plain screw up and fail. When it's talking about obscured proprietary information, a good example is something like a PDF file, which contains Adobe Illustrator information. That's kind of proprietary and is kind of outside the scope, but it is a threat. So you have to get rid of that stuff when you are creating a redacted version of that file. Okay, or the same, the user could screw up, or the redaction tool can fail. Now, the assumptions to the protection profile is that the software is working in a reasonable environment. That means that the computer doesn't have viruses on it, that the user is not trying to circumvent what the tool is doing, that somebody else in the department has not put something on the machine to make sure that the redaction software fails. So those are the assumptions that we're working in a reasonable environment. Another assumption is the user is trained on how to use the software. And if you read through the document, all of these are laid out. This presentation actually follows the document pretty well. Oh, if you have any questions while I'm going on, just shout them out, please. Now, protection profile is, as I said, pretty much a standard type format, and there are 4 sections related to redaction tools in the profile, and it's broken down like this. Report generation and review, validation, and there's a bit of an overlap with validation, redaction, and user experience, but they are separate sections and are addressed independently. So, report generation, validation, redaction itself, and the user experience for the redaction tool. If you go through this profile document, it's very much like a standards document. There's a lot of it that's very pedantic, and you'll see that going through. The first requirement for report generation is that the redaction tool must be able to generate a report on what it redacted. The next requirement is that it must be able to display that report to the user somehow. So a bit pedantic, but that is a separate must, and it will be tested on. Now, validation is the redaction tool must be able to understand the file format it's trying to redact. And I don't mean just open it up and display it. I mean really understand the file formats, being able to traverse through every single element within that file, understand what's there, and not just punt on some things. There actually is a couple examples. I mean, this is a generic document for electronic redaction in general, but there are some specific examples related to PDF in there. So I just threw them in offhand. PDF comments in a redacted file, no good, they're not allowed. PDF file header has to start at the first byte of the file. Now, if you're in prepress and publishing, you'll know there's lots of cases where PDF files in the prepress industry do not start at the first byte. In fact, they may start 1,000 bytes in the file because some people throw extra stuff at the beginning of the file. That's not allowed. And if you have a file that comes along, your redaction tool is supposed to reject that file based on it not starting at the first byte. Your redaction tool must simplify or remove any element that it cannot completely interpret. Again, simplify or remove complex objects. Again, a little bit more about recursion and be able to look through the individual pieces of the PDF elements themselves. Be able to go through all of the elements no matter how deeply nested they happen to be. Now, when I say simplify, give you a good example. Let's say you're talking about a waterfall plot where you have a graphic layered on top of another graphic, on top of another, on top of another, as the water falls down. Well, there could be text sitting behind one of those pieces of graphic. Well, the user can't see it on the page. You have to be able to find what's sitting back there. And just to make sure that nothing could be there, you have to simplify that graphic down. So it's no longer a layered graphic. Visible space replace primarily deals, it's best thought about as thinking about a text file. So you're talking about ASCII text. You have an element, inside of a text file, you have string text. It has 2 words that you want to redact, 20 characters. You put in XXX 20 times. No, can't do that. Because that gives you some clues about what was there. You know it was 20 characters. So you have to randomly change that a little bit. Make it 21, 22, 19, 18, something like that, so that you eliminate the clues of how long or how much something that was there. How long was the data that you removed? A lot of people get around this in the actual day-to-day use of redaction. A lot of people get around these types of issues by over-redacting. Instead of taking out that one word or 2 words or those couple of things that they need to actually redact, they take out the paragraph or the page. Now, in the redaction stage, one of the requirements of redaction tools is it actually must redact. That sounds pretty straightforward, but that is a requirement. Now, interestingly enough, let's say you have to redact content wherever it is. PDF form file. A PDF form file will have the same data in the file at least twice for every field. You've got to get it all, no matter where it is. Because in PDF form file, you've got a piece in the form tree, you've got a piece in the annotation as the appearance. You might have other things floating around. You might also have a graphic on page 2 that you're telling the redaction tool to redact. That graphic could get rippled across the document. That same graphic could be used in a different way somewhere else in the document. Interestingly enough, graphics could have parts of graphics displayed at different times. Let's say you have a big picture of 4 people in it. Technically, you can have that document, that graphic inside your PDF file displaying one face from each person on different pages. But it's the same image. And you don't actually recognize that as an end user because you look at it and see it on the pages as different images. Redaction tool must not include any new hidden data. The one concession to that we've gotten is we can include fonts or things that help in the printing process, but you're not supposed to include any new hidden data when you try and redact a file. Again, must remove all references. If you have an image referenced on page 2 and you've totally redacted that image, references to that image are gone too. You can't have it part of the marked content or anything else. It has to be completely gone. This is a must primarily for things like Word, which contain a lot of extra information, track changes, undo history and things like that. But it also applies to PDF when you're talking about incremental updates. Because incremental updates, yes, Mark?
You may be getting to what I asked as a buffer cache type container. Once encountered a file that was about 100 megabytes, but when we say as, we reduce the size by about 90%.
Yeah.
And I imagine there was something else in there that we weren't seeing. Would redaction have gotten rid of that? And if you hadn't, with somebody sophisticated enough,
Well, if you're talking about incremental updates on a PDF file, simple save as will get rid of all that extra crap. You don't need to do redaction.
but if we didn't redact it or save as, there was recoverable information.
Oh, sure. A friend of mine I was talking to yesterday had a good example that was internal to Adobe, where this was early on in the days of PDF, where one of the Adobe managers had created a PDF form with all the salary information and then distributed it to all the different employees by going in there, filling in a page for each, and then deleting the extra pages and passing out the file. At the time, there was a bug in Apple Preview, and it came up and displayed to all the users who received it. So you had the salary information of all your coworkers, because all that stuff was still in the file. This is a tough one, and it is a requirement that a redaction tool must not partially redact. When the user expecting you to redact, you've got to get it all. You cannot create a file that has been partially redacted. So in essence, you need to fail safely. Now, the user experience. This is another tough one. You must identify all hidden data in the file and allow the user to select whether or not they want to redact that hidden data individually, element by element, even though it's hidden. You must also, there is a difference between hidden data and obscured data in the minds of this document and how it was thought about when it was put together. Obscured data is you have something sitting on top of the data itself. Hidden data may not have something on top of it. It could be white text on a white background that's hidden from the user, but it's not necessarily obscured. So it's just a matter of definitions for that. Leonard had some heartburn with this one yesterday. Images in PDF are really flexible. And you can have a very high resolution image in a PDF file and keep zooming in on it, and no problem at all. You can be displaying portions of that PDF or that image. You can have portions of that image clipped, so you see some of the image and not other parts of the image. The requirement is that you will change the size of that image to conform to the basic resolution of the document. So you can't put in a 2540 dpi image into a document that's being displayed at 150 dpi or something like that. Okay. Must allow the user to review and select each element of visual data in whole or in part for redaction. It's pretty straightforward. You're just drawing boxes or you're selecting areas to be redacted. If, for whatever reason, the redaction tool fails, you have to tell the user. Now, the key points. Well, obviously, all data has to be redacted. This is different than any redaction tool currently that I know of right now, in that you must redact all data, including data that was not to be redacted. See, when we put together Redux, our mandate was to redact as little as possible. Just redact what the user told us to and not screw up anything else in the file. The protection profile requires that you basically get rid of everything that isn't front and center displayed to the user, regardless, unless the user tells you not to. So, images that are clipped, you've got to get rid of all of the parts of the image that are clipped. Clip page areas. So if you have a page that has been clipped down, you've got to change the size of the page and get rid of everything outside those clipping bounds. Layered objects have to be simplified. The user has to be able to select all this stuff that they can't see. Images must be scaled to the visual representation, which we're still struggling with that one. And the redaction must fail safe. So, here's where you can get the protection profile. You just download the web. It's actually pretty easy to read document as compared to most documents you see coming from ISO. It is redundant. You see the same thing over and over and again in document multiple times. There's also a list of the commercial testing laboratories. So if you have a redaction tool and you want it certified against the protection profile, you contact the testing laboratory, you work with the testing laboratory to get your software run through the tests and get certified under the profile. And Mike Herrera is the person to talk to if you want any further information. He is the one who has spearheaded the project and knows more about it than most folks. And Mike is one of the authors of the document, primary authors, along with Mark Sitzwall and Mary. They're to be commended. It was actually a very quick effort. The profile development started at the end of 2013 and was released in April of 2014. So it was a really fast job, lots of work went into it. Now, we have customers who have already started asking us when we are going to conform to the profile and have our software certified. Ironically, those customers are not DoD. They're other government agencies that are civilian agencies. As of right now, there are no redaction tools for PDF currently under evaluation for the profile. In our case, we have probably another 6 months of development effort before we can consider submitting the software for testing. Any questions? Yeah.
And you have to be 100%
Absolutely.
be certified?
There is no partial.
And you believe that's possible?
Many things are possible.
Just seems like some of those are, you could try 1,000 times and
Well, actually, I think the hard part is not so much making the software conform. I think the hard part is the testing laboratories validating conformance against the profile. Because the testing laboratories really have no expertise in PDF. They have to come up to speed on that. Yes?
Does it matter if your particular extraction or, redaction service only supports, let's say, TIFF on the front end, and then ultimately you can create a PDF out of that after the fact? Like, is that seen as being problematic if the only ingestion formats is like, let's say, for?
Well, I have to start repeating the questions. The question is it problematic if you go from TIFF to PDF?
No. Well, no, I'm saying, is it problematic to get certified if the only ingestion format supported by your redaction service is TIFF?
No. The production profile is pretty much agnostic. It's not specific to PDF, it's not specific to TIFF. It's very much neutral in file formats. It's basically just electronic file formats, whatever type. ASCII text is considered an electronic file format. Yes?
So twice now you've mentioned ASCII.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a difference for your purposes between ASCII and Unicode?
ASCII is not mentioned anywhere in the protection profile.
Mm-hmm.
I use ASCII as a simplified example.
Okay. So the protection profile would apply to documents in Unicode?
Correct.
Yeah.
One question, that on your earlier slides, you mentioned that the information is being, whatever you redacted should give no indication of the size of what got redacted. So, when you think of redacted documents like on paper, they draw a black line through a particular area.
Yeah.
You know the size of it.
Yeah, I know, it's contradictory.
That sounds complicated.
Yes, it is contradictory. So welcome to my world. It is contradictory, yes. I have no answer to that. Because it is.
Well, you can show an area where things were redacted from. In fact, that's the expectation. that you'll show that something was redacted, but they don't want you to do a one-to-one replacement. So his example about putting in X's, they don't want you to put in, X's to show that 20 characters or 15 characters were removed. But they do have an expectation that you'll show the end user document that yes, there were things that were taken out of this particular area of the document. And in terms of the government, they'll put in particular codes giving you a reason why something was removed. In the commercial space, people will just put private or confidential or something like that. But the government has whole lists of approved codes that have a whole paragraph of explanation behind them.
Yes.
Is the certification limited to just kind of like the end file output? Or, for example, we've got software that will do some redaction and then display a snippet of a document to an end user. In other words, obfuscating completely the rest of wherever that thing's coming from. So you do something, act on it, do some OCR correction, whatever, just on that snippet, because the rest of it needs to be kind of masked.
The certification is basically on the redaction portion of your tool, the portion that's actually doing redaction. And you are certifying the software. Oh, by the way, certification lasts for 2 years or until you change the version. But yeah, if you're talking about displaying something to a user, the process is strictly redaction. They don't care how you're displaying something, as long as you are redacting the output document correctly.
Okay, so it is about the result.
It is the result, yes. They're going to be testing the results. There's some things in here for user experience, but they're primarily testing for results. The majority is for results. The final output document. Out of time? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.